Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good dark topic. Let's do it. That guy or girl that had their life ruined in high school, what's happened to them since? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
A friend was with her boyfriend wintertime in a car. He died from carbon monoxide poisoning. She survived. It impacted her through school. Upon graduation, she moved to California. She was on a motorcycle with her new boyfriend during a road accident. He died. She suffered severe body burns from the accident's fire. Her face was disfigured as a result, requiring many years of facial surgery. Later years, we worked together. Her positive attitude was astounding, considering what she went through. Shortly after 9/11, Dude and his friend called in a bomb threat to the high school before school started. They traced the phone call to the payphone down the street, got him on camera. They arrested and expelled both of them from school. I don't know what happened to his friend, but his father and him started a tech security company roughly 10 years ago, and he's running it today. Dude stole his mom's car while coked up, ran red and killed a mother delivering papers to make some extra cash before Christmas. He got booked for DUI, vehicular manslaughter, and grand theft because his mom reported the car stolen before the accident. This guy was popular, so there were a lot of free BT, his initials on Facebook and MSN. Total scumbag move to get behind a wheel in that state. A few years behind bars and he got out. Did some more shady stuff. Was in and out of jail on drug charges, grand theft, theft under 1,000, stuff like that. Then he held up a grocery store with a knife, broad daylight, no mask or anything. Just walked into a Foodland and held the cashier at knife point and demanded cash. He got caught pretty easily. Did more time and then unfortunately OD'd after getting out after the armed robbery. What a wild spiral from a pretty popular guy at school. Dude wound up in a cult. After high school, Dude moved into a tent in the city park. Went jogging one day and got invited to a party at some place that turned out to be a cult. Big ass compound in some shithole town with a bunch of alpacas running around. Dude moved into the compound, got into drugs, and ended up fathering a bunch of kids. 5 years later, Dude left the cult, moved back into the tent, and went silent. Bam. Quit talking to everyone just like that. I see the dude around town sometimes, but he isn't the same. I'll catch him slinking through alleys, peering around corners, all paranoid and shit. Dude's always wearing the same hoodie, pulled all tight around his head. He even wears this thing in 90-degree heat in the dead of July. Whenever he sees me, his eyes bug out and he takes off running. Wild shit. A guy I went to high school with in the late 80s was the poor kid and had a heap of behavioral and anger issues. If there was a fight, it probably involved him. I think I thought the first 6 or so years of school, pretty much every guy in the class had been in a fight with this guy at one point or another. Either someone had said or done something that upset him, or he'd said or done something that upset them. In my case, he'd thrown a lump of wood at a kid and missed. It hit me in the head instead. So I chased him down, pushed him over, and booted him in the head. I absolutely should have been suspended for this, but because it was him, I got in no trouble and he was removed from class, again. Somehow in high school, he got a girlfriend, who happened to be a friend of my sister's. My sister cut ties with her friend because of this, and that was basically the last I heard of him, until a few years ago. I was back in my hometown for a few days, and my dad invited me to the golf clubhouse for a few beers after his round of golf. Once there, he introduced me to the guys he had been playing with, and said, apparently you two went to school together. Just then I realized who it was. He'd end up marrying that girl from high school, and they had a few kids. He was working as a manager at a nearby electrical appliance store, and generally, he was doing pretty well for himself. It turned out him and my dad played golf together fairly often over the years. It was good to see he'd done well for himself. Not at all what I'd expected when I knew him back in the day. Guy went in high school got super into drugs. A good friend of mine was throwing a house party and he showed up coked out of his effing gourd. Partway through the night, he randomly went ballistic and started violently attacking people. Someone broke a bottle over his head and knocked him out. A couple guys were able to get him in a car and drove him home to his parents, explained everything that happened, and helped them bring him to a hospital. We didn't see him for a little over a year after that. I don't know if something happened when the bottle was broken over his head, or it was all the drugs, or whatever happened during the year that he was gone, but I periodically saw him over the next few years, and it was literally like he had had a lobotomy. I would say hi to him, or other people would try to talk to him, and it was just like he wasn't there anymore. The lights were on, but no one was really home. Even him just saying hi back, there was like a 2-minute delay. Last I heard, he was still living with his parents. It sucked because he was never really a bad guy or anything. Hi, I'm one of those who kind of ruined my shit in high school. My great-grandfather, who was my only positive male figure, passed away and I got my first job. I stopped attending school altogether and spent most of my time drinking or smoking and thinking I was cool to my lame friends still going to school and not making money. I spent the years going from job to job, always broke but never homeless, dealt with extremely severe depression and anxiety issues and tried to kill myself at 18 and 22. Had extremely severe gambling issues in that stretch and lost tens of thousands of dollars between slots and scratchers and drank like a fish from that age range. I got my GED at 20 but didn't do anything with it for a while because I turned 20 in 2020, so COVID put a wrench in my plans. I worked in the gun business with my dad and ran background checks and did some sales. Made a lot of money doing that, but wasted it all in casinos, nice hotels when going out of town for gun shows, and expensive bottles of liquor. I'm 24 now and hold a steady job at a grocery warehouse with a union and am working on saving up money to move across the country to live with my girlfriend. I started actually using my Native American benefits and plan on attending college after I move and use the union I'm currently with to find a new job when I move states. I'm sober and haven't gambled in 2 years. Okay. 2 guys were racing on a residential street not far from the high school. One crashed into another car and killed a middle school student in the back seat, but both came from wealthy, well-connected families. They pled guilty, got fines, probation, and community service, which the one I was in class with bragged about faking doing, and got their licenses back by the time we were seniors. The one I knew never showed an ounce of remorse. He's now a high-powered attorney at a big firm in a large southern city. The other took over his dad's business, and the family has moved on like nothing happened. His sister was on Fox and Friends on weekends for a few years. I dropped out after a mental breakdown the first month of my senior year. It was a smallish school, and I was a captain on the lacrosse team, so when I disappeared, it was a big deal. Got super drunk at a football game and drove home, at some point driving directly into traffic. Somehow didn't crash, and my mom and stepdad somehow found me before the cops did. Mental breakdown ensued, and I revealed that I was pretty suicidal. Ended up spending a few days in the mental hospital. Was too embarrassed to return and dropped out and took the GED test. Had a couple of rough years after, and really regretted the social isolation I put myself into, but I'm okay-ish now. Have a viable career to make money, and an awesome girlfriend. Still struggled with my mental health and relationships with family and friends, though. Guy's parents went out of town for a weekend. Friday night, he was convinced to have a party. It got huge, but he stayed sober to make sure the house wasn't wrecked. Night ended, and he was the talk of the town for about 12 hours. Saturday night rolls around, and he announces he's throwing another. About 2 to 3 times as many people show up, then he decides to join in the festivities. Without him making sure the house wasn't destroyed, the crowd went absolute apeshit on it. Anything of value was stolen from the house. Carpets were ripped up, windows broken, windows were stolen, furniture was burned, etc. Sometime in the night, he was convinced to take his dad's newish F-150 for a spin, and he ended up ramming it into the side of a grain silo on the property. Police eventually came, and he caught a couple of charges, partially because the party the night before was shut down by police, but wasn't out of hand, so no one got in trouble, as long as sober people drove people home. Fast forward to Sunday evening, and his parents come home, and he obviously had no real chance at cleaning up. No one knows for sure what happened, but because he was 18, his parents co-signed loans for him to pay for everything that was destroyed. He lost college scholarships because of his charges. It's been 9 years now, and he hasn't left the town. I don't know what he does for work anymore, but to this day, he only ever talks about that party he threw. I was in varsity sports my sophomore year, advanced with honor programs, good grades. Got married off to an adult who had been in a position of authority over me and became mom to the baby his ex-wife abused, tried to kill, then abandoned. Had to get a job. Moved into a condemned, wrecked house. Missed a tremendous number of school days because kiddos spent a lot of time in the hospital and the dad's work was more necessary to our survival than my classes. Relationship was abusive. Husband lost his job. Power, water frequently cut off. I was graduated after my teachers got together and petitioned to pass me despite missing too many days because I'd kept my grades up and attended every makeup day. That freed up enough time that I could work 2 jobs while also being the housekeeper, cook, and parent. Husband spent most of what I made. Fast forward to today. Recently bought my dream home in my dream location. Happy, healthy relationship that's been going strong for over 2 decades. I ended up adopting kiddo from that first marriage, and he's now happily married with 2 beautiful kids, a good job, and his own home. 2 bio kids, now 17 and 19, who are both really well set up and starting their own journey into adulthood. Things are good. Mr. B was a basement dweller creep, the type that still lives with mom. Close to 50-year-old guy into model trains, ran the model train club, and idolized the Civil War, ran the Civil War club. Mr. B fell in love with a student. Mr. B slept with said student. Mr. B impregnated said student before her graduation. Mr. B married said student after graduation. Mr. B also lost his job. The student, let's say she wasn't 100% mentally there. She saw nothing wrong with any of this. Through her graduation year, she was a total laughingstock, and even more so after graduation when she married this guy. She had no friends, little family, and the whole town knew the whole situation, so she couldn't escape it. She ended up divorcing Mr. B a few years later and leaving town. Knowing Mr. B was the one that should have taken the brunt of everything, I hope that she's doing better in life now. Dude had a full-ride scholarship to pitch baseball for a major university in the same town as his favorite team, living the dream of a professional sports career, doing what he was most passionate about. Everything paid for, and he would soon go pro. His parents insisted he work through the summer instead of screwing around for 3 months after graduation, so he went to work at his dad's company. He had an accident in the warehouse and lost his finger. It was super quick, just cut it clean off in the blink of an eye. In that one moment, his entire soul went dark. The amputation ended his pitching career, and he was so damaged by the experience he just changed. Like a sort of evil took up residence inside him. You know how some serial killers are real good looking and seem all nice, but then there's this briefest flash of something demonic? That was him. He went downhill from there, ending with a stint in prison for R-ing a woman. There were other crimes along the way, but I didn't dig much further because I was afraid he went after kids. He preyed upon the vulnerable. Eventually, he moved to the city where he was supposed to go to school so he could watch his favorite team play.
Well, that is just terribly tragic all around. I mean, you don't want to have the child not work to develop some type of work ethic and then just a terrible accident. I could see how that would really alter that person's life.
So I knew these people in middle school, but this all happened to them in high school. Catching up with a friend I knew was like a horror story. So, my ex, we only dated a month, apparently got HIV, no news past that. My other ex, of 5 months, got physically assaulted, dodged a knife. She started drinking and smoking heavily at 15 despite having asthma. Sadly, she had her life somewhat together. A fiance, everything, but got COVID in February 2020 and passed away. At 26 years old, an only child as well. I still think about her sometimes, only wish we could have talked about how stupid we were as kids. Another girl was essayed by a gang and got pregnant from it. I think her Catholic parents forced her to keep it. Lastly, a kid I knew, a short dude, not really dangerous at all I thought, is spending life in prison for double homicide. My close friend doesn't believe he did it because Mike had a gun, but he would have never used it. One of them went off the deep end and blames everything on everyone else because he's incapable of taking responsibility for any decision he makes because he's been coddled his entire life. Example, he blames the woman he cheated on his wife with for his marriage ending. It was her fault. He had a multi-year affair that his wife, who he had been with since 10th grade, walked in on. He apparently had nothing to do with this multi-year affair and somehow accidentally ended up ass naked and balls deep with her in the bed he shared with his wife. The other is a street corner sex worker tweaker, but unfortunately, no one is surprised about that. One of the girls in my close friend circle in high school was the valedictorian of our senior class. Super gifted, sweet girl, who was really driven and an amazing artist. scored super high on her SAT, and got a full ride to several California schools. While at college, she got involved with some white supremacist dude. They got married, and she got caught in a stolen car and working in the meth trade. She came back to our small town and started working at the restaurant I was managing. She was covered in prison tats and AB markings. Great worker, and seemed like her old high school self, and appeared we had our friend back. I left the restaurant and became a cop and lost track of her for a few years. Ended up serving a high-risk warrant with the department SWAT team at what most people would describe as a trap house. And there was my friend, strung out and getting arrested. I tried to talk to her, and she didn't even recognize me. Super sad. She had a real promising life, and drugs ruined it. This was me. Junior year, I got caught selling, using, possessing drugs, and the second time got expelled. I moved out of my parents' house shortly after, horrible decision, and didn't enroll anywhere else for school. Less than a year later, had a really bad overdose. Had minor brain damage from lack of oxygen during the overdose. I had overdosed and been brought back with Narcan before, but this time was especially traumatic for friends who found me. The girl who found me blue-lipped and rattling is now dead from fentanyl. Almost everyone I was associated with in those times is either dead or in prison after the overdose. I started taking recovery seriously. I spent what would have been my senior year going to rehab and then getting out, relapsing, and going back into rehab. Used drugs for the last time in early 2019. Got my GED, and I'm coming up on 5 years in recovery now. Things aren't perfect, but they're significantly better than they ever were while I was using drugs. Seeing so many stories in this thread and realizing I should be dead or in prison.